Welcome back, everybody. Well, in today's episode we're going to be doing a walk around video on this John Deere rear mounted blade. Now, I picked this blade up right around last Thanksgiving, so end of November. It's currently the end of April. Haven't really used it too much. I did push some snow with it back in January, but the weather's nice, and I have a tractor show coming up here in a few weeks I'd like to take this blade and tractor to. So we'll do a quick walkthrough video, and I'll explain some of the history and the features on this blade. So again, this was actually built by John Deere. It's a model 240 economy blade, and what might stand out obviously would be the color. So it's yellow because it's an industrial blade. So back in the 50s, I believe that's when it really started, maybe even back in the 40s, John Deere tractors were obviously primarily green. May have had some yellow like the rims and on the hood, but right around, like I said, sometime in the 50s they started their industrial line, and this blade happens to be one of those pieces. So this was pretty much the first blade of its kind, basically a ground up, brand new design. There were no predecessors to this blade, and I believe this is an earlier one. The catalog I have on this says they started producing these in 1960. I believe this is an early one though, like I said, just because of some of the features it has, and I'll get into that here in a minute. But this blade was designed and built primarily for the John Deere 440 wheel tractor, which was an industrial heavy-duty version of the John Deere 430, which was an ag tractor primarily. And I have this blade on my John Deere 420W. The W stands for row crop utility. This tractor has a low stance, lower center of gravity, has a wide front end, designed for general purpose utility use and row crop farming. So again, the 430 replaced this in the John Deere series. That was, I believe, 1959 and 1960. And then during those 2 years, the end of the two-cylinder era, they designed, or they came out with the model 440. I'll show that picture here. Pretty nice example of a nice restoration on this 440. Again, it's a two-cylinder gasoline engine. But so from what I can tell, this blade was made exclusively for that tractor. And even some of the parts books and things I have, they do list the model 1010 and 1020, or I'm sorry, 2010, which were the new generation John Deere tractors. But this was sold as a low-cost landscape and maintenance blade, and they call it economy. That pretty much means this is stripped down and simplified as much as they can, just to save on the initial costs. As far as an ag blade goes, like for an ag tractor, this thing's pretty heavy duty. So on a construction site where you would have normally found this is like the lighter duty version. But again, Model 240, this is a 6-foot moldboard or blade on it. They had an optional 7-foot and optional 8-foot as well. This is category 1 for the 420. If you had a 6-foot blade, more than likely it was going to be a category 1. And I'll show you something neat here in a minute. But this blade's in very nice condition, very nice original condition, I'll say. And something I think is very neat is you can faintly see the older style John Deere logo. I believe that was the 4-legged deer design. You can see where it says John Deere right there. I can't find another picture anywhere, even in the manuals and the brochures I have, of a Model 240 with the decal there. Most of them had a smaller John Deere decal right here, and then it had John Deere in font or text down here. So I want to say this is an earlier one again, so it could be even like a pre-production, maybe even 1959, somewhere in that era. So again, this is a category 1 3-point hitch. That's what all these 420s, 430s, and 440s would have came with. Something neat, I think, on this blade that really stands out is how they designed this mainframe. It's basically, you know, plate steel, relatively thin, formed like a triangle, and it tapers from the 3-point hitch to the back. So that kind of gives it a neat look, I think. So hydraulic raise and lower from the 3-point. You can manually pitch the blade by manually adjusting your center link or top link right here. This blade does angle, so it's mostly used for pulling applications. So you actually have more increments to angle the blade pulling forward. This blade can swing around 180, so you can push backwards. There are less holes for adjustment when you're pushing backwards. I think they mostly would have used this for backfilling around foundations or something. I saw a pretty neat video online from the John Deere archives, I think, of a 440 in this blade, and they were grading and landscaping, basically finished grading around brand new homes in a housing development. So back in the 50s, skid steers didn't exist, you know, mini excavators, even smaller bulldozers, and John Deere had their own line, but these were on a tractor. Most times they had a front loader. It's almost like a skip loader. It's good for loader use, but also for fine grading and backfilling up against houses and, you know, pipelines and things like that. Just kind of a general purpose blade. So it's currently centered on the main frame. You can manually offset the blade. Sorry, trying to stay out of my shadow here. You can manually offset the blade either way. So you can see there's a bolt right there. So there's 2 lower bolts and 2 upper bolts. So you have to remove these 2 bolts, and then you shift the mold board over and reinstall them in the next set of holes over. I think it's a 12-inch offset either way. The only way that you can tilt the blade or pitch it like this would be to manually adjust one of your draft links or your 3-point arms, so you wouldn't get too much adjustment that way. And there's a pin back here, and the original pin is probably long gone. Somebody just put a square head bolt in here, which has seen better days. I haven't really touched this since I purchased it. Just like I said, pushed some snow with it. But you can see back here, this needs to be worked back into shape. Looks like they got up underneath something and damaged that. But this is pretty much your main pin for adjusting your angle. And there's a center bolt. You can see the nut right there on the bottom. So that's what supports that blade and obviously allows it to tilt. So a couple other neat options they had for this blade was a rear tail wheel used for finer grading. There's actually, there was a bracket that you mounted right here, which came up, supported a rod that was right near the operator's seat. The rod came down to the rear. There was another supporting bracket which mounted on these 4 holes, which supported a single tail wheel. And that hand crank rod, you can turn around as you're sitting on the tractor. You crank that and you can adjust the pitch of the wheel so that, you know, just kind of gives you more a more consistent grade if you're grading in loose soil or, you know, gravel or something like that. But again, a 6-foot blade here. It has a 6-inch tall cutting edge, 1/2 inch thick, I believe is what the book says. That is reversible, so it does not look like it's ever been flipped, which is nice. The only wear on this thing is right here on the edges, which is pretty typical. It's not even that bad. But if I wanted to flip this, just take the plow bolts out, turn it upside down, put it back on, I got a fresh cutting edge. Another option they had for these 240s, oh, and by the way, you can see right here what's left of the original 240 decal, where that was more of like a, probably like a water transfer. The old style decals, it wasn't really vinyl. like the modern ones are. But you could also buy cutting edges for this, so side cutting edges that would bolt on right here to basically protect the normal edge here of the blade, and it has a sharper bevel on it for cutting in, you know, ditches and stuff. And just an option. If I can ever find a set for this blade, I'd probably buy that, and just a nice feature to have. I think I parked this the wrong way. I'm standing in the sun, but yeah, like I said, neat little blade. I haven't really seen too many of these. Like I said, there was the 240, and then they also had the 245, which was the heavy duty version. Pretty much just had a lot more bracing and stiffeners behind the, you know, mold board here. But I'd be surprised if you have this on a tractor like this. Yeah, you're not going to do much damage, I don't think, to this blade. But again, right around 1960-ish. So this is a 1958 model 420, so sort of time period correct. And then John Deere did move into a model 78 rear blade in 1964. And as far as I can tell, all those blades were painted green. And they look identical to the 240s actually. But they carried that model, like I said, 1964 up into probably the 70s. Still had the 6 foot, 7 foot, or 8 foot options for that blade. So yeah, just some neat history. I know it just might seem like a blade to most people, but if you're into the John Deere stuff, there's some pretty neat history there, I think. And it's definitely a nice piece to have. It's more of a show piece, but like I said, the show's coming up here in a few weeks. That's the National Pike Steam Show in Brownsville, PA. If all works out well, I'll have this tractor and blade there at the May show at the end of, or actually the middle of May. If the weather's nice, I might try to grade some dirt with this tractor and blade. So I have a little bit of work I need to do to this before I take it to the show. Just want to make sure nothing's going to fall apart on me. But what I do want to do at some point is remove this center pivot bolt, actually remove this main frame from this piece. There's a lot of corrosion and just dirt that's trapped in between these two surfaces, and that's what those two surfaces allow the blade to pivot and, you know, support the blade as it's pivoting. But probably just going to clean those surfaces up. Might need to put a new washer below there. Something's definitely not right. There shouldn't be that big of a gap. I think that bolt just got worn or loose, and so there's some play in there now. I do want to replicate the original looking pin. I have the parts book for this blade, and I know what the original pin looks like, so it shouldn't be too hard to make a repo of that, or a reproduction of that rather. But yeah, I just need to get this sheet metal straightened up back here. Not sure if that will happen before the show or not, but just check all the bolts and everything. Shouldn't really be too big of a concern. Something else that was kind of neat about these blades, like I mentioned, this is a category 1, but if you wanted to change it to a category 2, this is actually a hollow, that's kind of dark in there, but this is a hollow pipe or tube. You can see the pin here. The pin's actually a solid shaft which goes all the way through that hollow tube, and there's a center roll pin right here, if you can see that. So you would drive that roll pin through. You can then knock this shaft out of the frame, slide your category 2 shaft back in, set the roll pin, and you might need to change the top link ball out for the larger ball. But that's as simple as that. You could have a category 2. But yeah, they designed this thing for tractors up to 50 horsepower, they said. So I'm roughly half that now with this 420, so shouldn't be any problems for this tractor. So hope you guys enjoyed this video. Like I said, if you have questions on this, feel free to leave some comments down below. Nice looking original blade. Glad I could add it to the collection, and looking forward to hopefully taking it down to the steam show. Stay tuned, we'll have some more videos coming. Like I said, I know it's been a while since I posted, Been kind of busy doing some things. We put in some new fence and some new gates here at the farm. We're getting to the end of April here, so looking forward to this coming show season and summer. Have some more projects and things lined up, so make sure you stay tuned, and hopefully in an upcoming video here I will be able to show you guys this blade in action, so stay tuned for that. Again, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed.